Yeah, g'day. Great speech there by both of you. Great facts, great implementations that should be implemented, I believe. Concerning the GFC 2008, Kevin Rudd, Wayne Swan got us out of the dilemma. We fared the best in the world. Just wondering what your thoughts on what the Liberals would have done. Definitely not a stimulus package. And as well, concerning the coronavirus, Professor Francis Boyle has come out saying that he believes that coronavirus is a biological weapon to unstabilise the world, especially China, so the US can strive ahead to become number one. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, if the Conservatives had been in power when the GFC hit Australia, we would have had austerity policy, and we would be a mirror for the UK where we would still be suffering.
Yep.
So they just would have destroyed the economy of the country and continued to blame the people that were facing poverty and destitution because of their policies. They would have sold more of the farm than they've sold now. As a bit like our, state Labor government. What can you sell without, replacing the income that you've lost from what you've sold? So we have that line. And the, I don't think coronavirus is I don't think it's a biological weapon. I think it's quite right that it's come from poor practice through the wet markets, because we do know that interspecies transmission of viruses happen. And China's not set up with, they may have built a hospital over a weekend, but they're not really set up anywhere along the lines of Western countries for health services. You might be socialist, it doesn't mean you really look after your people. So you've got all those problems. Grabbing people off the streets and throwing them in the van is not exactly a solution to a health crisis. So, there was reference, though, I think, we'll look at it. I mean, Being Coots, The Eyes of Darkness book from 1981. That made the press over the weekend. Okay, it actually mentions a virus coming out of Wuhan in the year 2020, so people are freaking out. But it's a nice little overlapping of circumstances. It's amusing in its own way, but poor hygiene practices lead to poor results.
I'll take the coronavirus first. I think if it was the CIA trying to do something to the Chinese economy, they'd have found a much more virulent kind of thing like smallpox or something like that. Not the coronavirus, which for most people only gives you mild symptoms of flu. So I don't think it was a bug introduced by the Americans or the CIA or their friends. What would the coalition have done, the Conservatives have done, if they had faced the global crisis, the global financial crisis? From what I've heard from a lot of people, not name dropping, but people from the Treasury and the bank, the Reserve Bank, and including the parliamentarians, they were really scared stiff. They were just pissing their pants, if you excuse the phrase. They were just scared stiff about what to do. So they took the advice from the Treasury about what to do. So whether the coalition would have done the same thing, I don't know. But I think they might have at least had to try and do some of the things that Kevin Rudd and co did. And I think because the advice they're getting very strongly, it's happening in the United States too, that they were so scared about the crisis that they were being advised to do something else about it. As you know, at the moment, the Reserve Bank, this guy called the Governor Lowe, has told the Morrison government, you should increase fiscal expenditure. This is amazing coming from him. He's basically saying changing interest rates does sweep FA. Excuse the phrase again. And unfortunately, he's done the same. He's reduced the interest rates again. He's going to do nothing to stimulate the economy, basically. It's keeping the financial sector happy. And that's about all it's going to do. Thank you.
Can I ask a supplementary question? As we talk into it, which really follows on from the first question, and that is, what would you anticipate the current government would do? Because they can surely see all the statistics that you've just described. My guess is that they would increase capital spending in marginal seats if they were worried that they're going to lose at the next election, which is probably a consequence of this recession coming about. So if you put yourself in the shoes of the government, what would you do to avoid the likelihood of this recession happening?
Thank you. I find it difficult to be in the shoes of Mr. Morrison or his gang there. But, I think they are scared too. They are worried. And they're actually saying now that maybe we won't have budget surplus because they won't have to spend more. Yes, I think they will spend in key areas, but spending on so-called capital investment or infrastructure investment takes a long time before it leads to an increased expenditures by people. Now, whether they'll do something which they could do easily, given that even I've got the labels for the AIG and other industry group guys say, they are suggesting you should increase new start allowance. Even they are saying the new start allowance should go up. Now that I think Morrison government could do quite easily and say, oh, we're just moving because our friends business lobby has been telling us to do that. So that they could do quickly. And I think that would be at least half-assed gesture towards getting something done. Yes, they're likely to spend little places next to their marginal seats, as just come out in the so-called sports royal affair, and I'm sure they'll do that too. But I don't think they'll go soon and go hard, which was the recommendation after the last crisis, the global financial crisis. I don't think they will do as much, and I think the economy will suffer as a result. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much. Yep. To the speakers, that was very interesting and begins a big discussion. I just went to a seminar at Sydney Uni today which was talking about the Green New Deal idea. And I think actually looking at your 10-point plan, in some ways there's an overlap there. Because really, how is Australia going to get out of the economic collapse or recession in effect that it's in, is to focus on its strong points. And the possibility of reviving Australian industry has to be based on our strong points, which is the possibility of massive development of solar power, wind power, possibly wave power, and the development of energy industries instead of just exporting gas and coal, which we get no return for because those companies pay almost no tax or zero tax or they're even subsidised. So at the moment we are losing from our main points that we're getting. We need to start developing massively in that area. Now, one question in relation to Robyn, I have heard talks from people from the Electrical Trades Union and others that a lot of these solar farms that are being built out in the bush are not, they're not unionised and they're not getting, proper paid jobs. And this is one of the problems if we're going to talk about a just transition from the well-paid jobs we have in the coal industry, we've got to provide a real economy that would be attractive to workers and unionised jobs in the new industries. And I'll just throw in one more thing. I've also heard that, Australia has the highest per capita solar investment in solar on rooftop solar, and yet it's almost completely ununionised, that industry. So I think what it is, it's both an opportunity and a challenge for the union movement and also for the economy. If we're going to go ahead and build the economy, it has to be a green economy. And I also agree with all your other points in your 10-point plan too. Thank you.
Thank you. just some of the things I said about like the Green New Deal. I did a paper with my colleague Peter Sheldon for the CFMMEU, which is called the Just Transition, because one of the things that we want to get through the coal industry, but we have to worry about what happens to workers there. And what we suggested was following a system similar to what they did in Germany, where they've almost got rid of the whole coal industry there by introducing policies to help workers to move from one area to another, to retrain them, to provide social security benefits to people who can't find jobs, etc., etc. So I think it's very important. In terms of solar panels, yes, apparently Australia was leading in solar panels, but then most of the solar panels are produced in China nowadays. Good grief. But I think I'll let Robyn go on.
We used to manufacture solar panels in Sydney, near Olympic Park, and then it did offshore to China, and now we import them back again. In relation to the installation of solar panels, what they do is they engage the workforce as individual contractors, which makes it hard to unionise. It's the same with the NBN rollout that happened with that. The workers were engaged as individual contractors. Because they work in small groups, a lot harder to find and unionise. So part of the answer to that is there used to be something called the control test. It was used for casual workers, to work out if you were genuinely a casual. The same thing should apply to individual contractors. Do you control when you work, how you work, or is it dictated by somebody else? And for most of these contractors, they have no control. They're engaged, they do as they're told, they turn up when they're told. They can't say, I'm not turning up, because they'll lose the work or get re-engaged. So there's been small changes again through Fair Work Commission, some of that. The Uber rule and related, there's some push there, but it's the same ploy used by the peak employer, whether it's a company or subgroups, to disenfranchise workers from their rights. And it's a struggle, because at the moment with the Fair Work Act and the way it operates, it's incredibly hard for unions to get to and organise these workers. It doesn't mean we're not trying.
Okay, Sarah, another question? I think I've got the feeling that, okay, good, okay. We'll just use the one microphone now, so I'll take it back off you when you finish the question.
We've heard a lot of the symptoms of our sick economy, dare I say, or infected, or whatever you like to call it, if you look at it as another kind of virus. So we've heard a lot of ideas about, how we can apply band-aids and perhaps revive the patient, etc., etc. But what is the cause exactly? And I think globalism is really one of the causes. I remember the days when globalism sounded such a happy, warm, connected community, like the global community. Oh, but it's not like that. And when we look at all the things that have been happening, a capitalist economy has to keep growing, whether it needs to or not. It's like human beings becoming unviable, really. They don't work, you don't put money into human beings. They're no value. The economy's got to be well, but not for human beings. We've sold off assets so much. We bring in workers from overseas. Then, with the growing automation, know, look at the checkout chicks and chaps, and they're being replaced by machines which don't pay taxes. Where are the Australian-owned supermarkets? Why haven't we, in all this time, it's always, oh, but we need investment, And finally we just give up and seem to just sell out. Education has become an economy, it seems to me, and even heads of universities are referred to as CEOs. Public schools are just, living on the crumbs of taxpayers' money, whereas mostly going to private schools.
So we've got a lot of comment there that you might want to comment back. Hello?
That's a very long statement that you made, or comment you made. Yes, I think the whole economic system is aimed at making more profits, and we have so-called free markets all over the place. Don't forget our wonderful treasurer, Paul Keating, was one of the earlier persons who introduced privatisation in a whole range of areas in the Australian economy. Not forgetting the unemployed people who had to have so-called mutual obligations, that is, they had to say they were willing to go and look for 500 jobs a day or an hour or whatever, and so on and so on, which the new government, the coalition government, calls reciprocal obligation, the same idea. So that was also privatised, and the whole concept of what was called the CBS, Economic Employment Service, was also privatised. A whole range of industries were privatised under the former Labour government. So I think essentially both parties seem to think that privatisation is a great idea. The current government simply goes a little bit further than that. I hate to say this because I do vote for the Labour Party, but anyway, but the coalition government just goes even more steps in the same direction. So I think yes, the whole system is based on profit motive. Globalisation has actually done lots of wonderful things for us too. We can buy lots of things now which we could never do 50, 25 years ago. Well, I don't know, you buy clothes, we can buy clothes now at about half the price you could 10 years ago.
What's happened to our manufacturing?
So there are benefits of globalisation, and you can get technology from the rest of the world, which also helps us too. Unfortunately, a lot of the technology that we develop in Australia itself gets sold off to somewhere else. I don't know if you know this thing called the cochlear thing, which was developed in Australia, but that's gone somewhere else. I forgot where it is now. It's no longer produced in this country. And so that happens all the time. And I think there are costs and there are benefits. I don't think we can stop globalisation. It's happened. But what we can do is introduce a whole lot of regulations to prevent it from exploiting people out here. Unfortunately, this government doesn't believe in regulation and believes that the free market will work wonders. And I for one, don't agree with that. Thank you.
The job of government is to control capital. We have governments, we've had a series of governments who don't see that as their role. So if you look at our policies about the buying of Australian businesses, a link has been in the press this week over power. There's the issue of dairy companies being sold. There's other companies that get sold to foreign interests. But the question becomes, you can sell to foreign interests, but why should you offshore the profit? The government can bring in controls, and they're doing that, and they're mumbling about it for some companies like Google, etc., wanting, again, you're making billions here, we want you to pay some more tax. The government's got the ability to deal with that. The Googles, the Facebooks, whatever, they're not going to leave the market here if they're forced to pay tax. So there are things that the government can do. There's also government strategies that they can have for investment in new technologies and new businesses. So but we have to hold the government to account. And it's looking at how we do that, how we get people interested enough in their own futures and the future of their children and grandchildren, where they are willing to hold government to account. And politicians are very sensitive, but we don't work on that. They've all got an electorate that they've got to be accountable to. They don't like people knocking on their doors. They want us to be quiet Australians. Morrison's quiet Australians, that's the quiet Australians so I can fuck you over. So we've got to be the noisy Australians, and we've got to get our friends being noisy with us, and that's how we get change.
Okay. So, on that note, we'll end the Q&A session. I want you once again to thank Robyn, Fortescue and Professor Junankar.